GTM Podcast Blessing for Living in Amendable Location. Hello everyone, welcome to GTM Podcast. I hope you enjoy our podcast so far. And in this episode, we will continue with our blessing for living in amendable location. We had learned from the previous episode that there are components that make the location become amendable. Thus, in this episode, we will discuss further into these components. The components of amendable location cannot be defined globally because they mean different things at different levels of explanation. The first of the components is amendable location. For the national level, at the geographical level, it may mean an amendable climate that is not too hot and not too cold. It might mean that the landscape is not too rough or liable to flooding, but at the same time, with convenient communications towards the rest of the world. At a more local level, an amendable climate means ease for the populace in earning a decent living, good communications, proper social infrastructure, and a plentiful supply of clean drinking water. For the neighborhood level, on the level of the neighborhood, the things that make the environment amendable are a proper water and electricity supply, a good road system to avoid traffic jams, good communications, and no flooding in the rain season. On the level of the household, the things that count for making the environment amendable are a properly planned house with sufficient space, good ventilation, enough trees around and about to give shade, nearby open areas or parks, and no disturbance from noise. Applying the same principles to the temple, amendable temple ground is sufficiently spacious for the number of temple goers or visitors, with enough shade to allow congregation to meditate in comfort without disturbance from the hustle and bustle of urban life. Second is amendable food. On a national level, amendable food means being self-sufficient in one's food supply, not having to rely on neighboring countries for one's food supply or drinking water. On local level, amendable food might mean the proximity of a market for foodstuffs. It might also mean being able to grow home produce. In any case, anyone who lives in an area liable to flooding should try to be self-sufficient with their own cottage garden. It doesn't matter how you go about growing the vegetables. For some villages, when the floods come, if the government doesn't send in supplies by helicopter for 2 or 3 days, the whole village will starve. These are always the villages which are too lazy to grow their own vegetables. If they had grown their own vegetables, even though the flood comes, it doesn't particularly bother them. By contrast, those places that plant only cash crops like maize lose everything they have as soon as the flood arrives. Just having a few vegetables like onions in the garden allow one to survive for over a month even when the floods come. For the neighborhood level, availability of food at the neighborhood level might mean the proximity of the market. On the household level, an amendable food supply at the household level can be summarized with just a few brief hints. 1. You should have a supply of vegetable used around the kitchen in reserve in your own cottage garden in case of times of need. 2. Your house should be located close to the market. If it is too far from the market, this will become an obstacle to obtaining food. 3. Your house ought to have a good cook. A good cook is the heart of a successful kitchen. There was once an army general who commented in front of his wife. Whether he meant to praise her or criticize her is uncertain though, saying that the only reason that I have been able to put up with her all these years is her only single good point Apart from this point, there is nothing good about her. She neglects the children. She is useless at receiving guests. She takes little care of household finance. I have to do all the accounts myself. The only reason that I have been able to put up with her all these years is that she makes a tasty meal. If it wasn't for her being a good cook, we would have gone our separate ways years ago. Anybody who thinks they can rely on instant foods, convenient foods, and takeaway should think again. Everybody attempt to learn how to cook. If ever you have to take care of someone who is ill or lonely or anxious, who have lost their appetite, and you can't get out to the market, that will be the time when your ability to make a proper meal will really make a difference. For as long as we still have defilements in the mind, we still have an appetite and we still have our favorite foods. We are not all like crocodile, which can survive on a gravel. For as long as we still human, we are still choosy about the food we eat. Too sweet or sour, salty or oily, and the food loses its attraction. Thus, if the food we eat is to be amendable, there is no harm in food being tasty. 3. Amendable neighbor. These need to be clarified a little bit for its definition. The various characteristics of a location or a neighborhood, whether good or bad, are only general characteristics. Even if the general characteristics of a location are abysmal, but the place is inhabited by virtuous people, then the drawbacks of the location can be overcome. On the other hand, in a good location with good housing and employment prospect, if the inhabitants are dishonest, however beautiful the building is, it can be no better than a den of thieves. If the inhabitants are peaceful and well-mannered, like monks, then the buildings are a refuge as good as a temple. At the national level, amendable personal means a population who eke out their existence by honest means. It means a population that lacks criminals, terrorists, or anarchists who threaten the unity of the country. At the local level, if the populace are interested in nothing more than earning their living, society will not be a happy one. At the neighborhood level, in addition to a hardworking populace, there must be those who make a direct contribution to the well-being of the society. 1. Doctors are necessary in any society. Without them, every illness will entail death. Even if a location is most profitable of marketplace, without doctors in the background, it can never become an amendable society. 2. Patrons and benefactors. Patrons and benefactors arise in a society where there is a trading. Those who live in a mercantile society reap the benefit of having capital, and such a society breeds rich benefactors and millionaires. Compare a society of people where there are only paupers and beggars, and you will see how hard it is for such a society to become amenable to the study of Dhamma. In the time of the Lord Buddha, if a king decides to establish a new city, even if he has sufficient labor, craftsmen, without being granted a benefactor or patron from a neighboring city, to be the patron of the new city, the king wouldn't dare to build a new town. The reason that having a patron was so important, apart from being a capitalist who would stimulate trade and growth, he would act as the economist who would help the king with his financial policy, making so that the new city would be able to keep its financial head above water. 3. Wise men. Many of the reasons for the importance of the wise have already been covered in Blessing 2. In brief, the wise has a special discretion which allows them to distinguish between what is right and what is wrong, what's appropriate and what's inappropriate, what is meritorious and what is downright evil. Even if you are illiterate, but you can tell the difference between right and wrong. You can still be considered a wise one. Thus, if you are choosing a place to live, avoid choosing a place where there is no wise one live, because in such a place society is not amenable to study of Dhamma. 4. Righteous monarch, who is established in the 10 virtues of a monarch. Without going into detail, it can be said that qualifying monarch must be just and moral. Of course, the country's leader doesn't have to be a king to make it an amenable place to live. The same virtues in a president will make this country as amenable as a country governed by a virtuous king. And for the household level, amenable personnel at the level of the household means the leader of the household must be virtuous. The husband should abstain from drinking alcohol, the wife from gambling, for example. Both should be earnest in earning an honest living. Their children should be earnest in their studies and should be obedient to their parents' command. In this way, the household will be united as the smallest unit of an amenable society. And thus, this is the first part of components that require making a location become amenable. We will continue in the second part, which is amendable Dhamma. We hope you continue and supporting us. If you like the program, don't forget to subscribe, like and share. Let's see each other again in the next episode.